In our first episode, we began telling the story of how, throughout the 1980s, the cassette tape became a cheap and accessible medium for independent musicians to easily copy and then distribute their work to others using the postal system. A connected network emerged with artists and cassette labels publishing independent underground music and fanzines sharing reviews, calls for submissions and information about the scene. With the influential 1989 compilation tape Premonitions being reissued on the Infinite Expanse label, we began to track down the original contributing artists and, 35 years later, explore the impact of the cassette network. This is cassette culture. In this episode, we managed to track down the man who was to become a crucial connection in our story. Steve Gears from Manchester in the UK. I'm Martin Franklin. Steve and I corresponded regularly throughout 1989 and 1990, exchanging flyers, music, and contributions for compilation releases on each other's labels. What was your entry point into the cassette network? When did you first come across it?
There was an ad in the NME for Premonitions. So we submitted a track and you put it out, and then we nicked all your bands and put it on our ambient side of Attend Attention.
Yeah.
And that was it. Premonitions was the influence for us to do Attend Attention.
How did you come to that point of deciding, okay, we're going to become a label? And
we called our label Pharoah Chromium Sound, which was a chrome track. But we're really into chrome, and we're also into on-new sound, so we just merged the name and came up with a Pharoah Chromium Sound. It was the only way for us to get our stuff out, really. And we just wanted like-minded people who could, kick it on, move it on to something else.
How did you find those connections? Did you advertise as well?
Yes, yeah. We advertised in the NME an Avant Noise ambient compilation tape. Please send to the Happy Citizen.
So what was it like when all of the contributions started rolling in through your letterbox?
Oh, it's great. It's very exciting. Very exciting. It was great at the time because everybody seemed to be, all my circle, everybody seemed to be doing things, either playing in bands, fanzines, art, whatever. There was a real little kind of scene. And the tape thing was easier to do it with cassette. There's no way people were going to put our stuff out on vinyl, and I think that might have been a case for a lot of the bands who were on these tapes.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a cheap and easy way of communicating people's ideas. That apart from John Peel and On the Wire and Radio Lancashire, there was very little outlet for bands like that, and the cassette scene helped that in a hell of a lot of a way.
The first current your LP as is listening of the decade, and these are the kind of dodgy people we have to deal with. Speaking of which, Steve Gears from the Happy Citizen Manchester Avant Noisemakers has sent us a tape, Premonitions, an international compilation of electronic ambient world music which the Happy Citizen make a contribution to. It's surprisingly well recorded, very restful and mellow in places, but we have to face facts, kids. These people haven't been smoking Embassy Regal King Size. It features music from the UK, France and various parts of America with 10 tracks, and it really is very good. We know what the Happy Citizens sound like, so this is piece 10 from the Omega Ensemble, who come from Southampton. Piece 10, that, from the Omega Ensemble, taken from the international compilation of electronic ambient world music cassette Premonitions, which costs £3.50 from Sound Image Tapes, 17 Baylis Road, that's Baylis, Slough, SL1 3PH. You can make checks payable to M. Franklin. Meanwhile, Steve Gears is well on the way with his compilation tape of Avant Noise Merchants, but there's still some space on it if you'd like to make a contribution. That's it, I think. Stay cool next weekend, don't be drinking too much and making fools of yourselves. And if you wake up on Christmas morning in a strange place and thinking that you've never felt like this before, don't worry, it goes away. Donald, where's your Toulouse?
When the Happy Citizen, with Attend Attention, we met Basie v. Webster, which was Jamie, Alan, and Carl McGinley. We just kind of meeting up at gigs, and the idea was, let's do a record between us. Like, we'll do one side, you do the other, and we'll contribute a track between us. Work together. And then we just decided, let's work together. The Happy Citizen joined forces with Basie v. Webster to become a 7% Solution. I mean, things had moved on when we're going to set up websites and what have you, recording our material, other side projects, artwork, and film. And that's where we became DOTCA, which of course means Darlings of the Cassette Age, which we all are.
All right, so that's amazing that you kept correspondence from those years.
I had thousands of tapes in a box, and I went through a lot of them. It took me days, but I've got them all. I've got them all. If it's going to be any help, I can send all this correspondence to you. I've got stuff from Omega Ensemble. I've got a letter from you.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I would love that.
Right, I can do that. I'll do that later on today.
That's
probably a good opportunity to digitise it as well.
Indeed, yeah. The addresses you heard in this segment are from an archive radio recording of On the Wire on BBC Radio Lancashire in 1989. So, needless to say, don't try sending money to it now. Joining forces with other musicians from across the cassette scene was not uncommon. But finding the shared history with another musician years later led Richard Talbot to form Marconi Union in 2003. Here's how Richard tells the story.
Well, you'd see the same names. You get a cassette back from somebody and you think, I was on a thing with them. And I'm on a thing with them. And one of them, I was on a couple of things with, I think, called Basie v. Webster. Although we didn't make any connection at the time, really, later on, we were to, I guess both of us had our lives changed by knowing each other, because one of those people was Jamie, who was the other half of the Marconi Union when we started it. So, and we did that for 25 years, but we didn't know each other at the time, we didn't have any contacts. And then the guy who put together one of those tapes did contact me and say about playing a gig, which never happened. And I got to know him later on because he was a friend of Jamie's.
Did you then sort of subsequently discover that you were both putting tracks out on cassette releases?
We found out completely by accident. We worked together in a record shop.
Oh, yeah.
And the first day there, one of us said, there was a great time when I was just putting out stuff on cassettes and sending them to people, and the other one said, I did that too. And then we realised that there was this crossover.
Right.
And we didn't immediately then say, right, we must form a band.
Yeah.
but we did. It ended up there because we would mess around with things like taking tapes into the CDs. It would be into a record shop and playing them on the system and stuff. So yeah.
Moving on to contemporary cassette releases, we spoke to Tom Gibbs, founder of Infinite Expanse, the label dedicated to unearthing pre-internet rarities, including the Premonitions cassette, which kick-started all of these conversations. So first of all, Tom, I wanted to ask you about the origin story of Infinite Expanse and how the label came into being.
So it started originally as a YouTube channel. That was its sort of original conception. And I started it probably when I was about 20, 21. And over those kind of years, took a turn towards the sort of weirder, stranger world of experimental, electronic, industrial music. like part of the attraction to the pre-internet 80s, cassette culture scene is the fact that, this music was traded and shared in a way that is totally alien for someone like myself. I was born in 1996, so after this scene was already gone, and that's always been part of the attraction. The uncovering of people's stories and, sharing the stories of outsider people or, people that wouldn't share the stories themselves, or just haven't had the platform to do so is, also part of the drive for me. It was through the Sound Image compilation that I first heard the Ensemble. Aside from that, there's just the compilation Attend Attention on Pharoah Chromium Sound, and nothing else. I mean, these guys were clearly, super talented musicians pushing this kind of free jazz with experimental, lo-fi, DIY electronics. It then certainly set me down the track of trying to hunt any information on them. Richard Leake also happened to have a track on the Pharoah Chromium Sound compilation. He was then able, via Jamie, who was in Marconi Union with, to link me up with Steve Gears. He's not online, so he uses his wife's email, and he's then sent me a couple of letters with the Ensemble tape in.
So through this, pursuing these, connections that you knew of from the artists, you managed to get the actual tape which Omega Ensemble were sending out. So this provided you with another piece of information about the group, right?
It did. It had a number, a name, and an address. I thought it was probably quite unlikely that Phil Collins, who is noted to be the artist behind, or he's at least the name written on the inside of the cassette tape. I thought it was pretty unlikely that he was going to be at the same address all these years later, because the tape came out in 1988. So I thought maybe the number was going to be, more reasonable, that someone would have held on to the same number all these years. But yeah, that wasn't the case. And as I was to find out, the mobile wasn't so good, and the address was going to be the more fruitful.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. When and Rosie going to answer you, yeah? No, don't know who. Anybody. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
We'll just see. I mean, who knows what we'll manage to, uncover.
In this episode, you heard the voices of Steve Gears, Richard Talbot, and Tom Gibbs. The music was Incision by Sirius B from Attend Attention, Piece 10 by the Omega Ensemble, Untitled by Basie v. Webster, The Contact by Marconi Union, Chinsky Poticek, Richter Band from Smetana on Infinite Expanse, and This Is Concrete by The Happy Citizen. In the next episode, while we wait for the package from Steve Gear's cassette archive to arrive, we'll be speaking again with Sandy Nice of Hybrids and Rob Maycock of Mindscan Tapes. And also, we'll hear from Tom on the next steps in his search to find members of the Omega Ensemble.